nation, any country that decides to separate people on the basis of ethnicity doesn't deserve a place at the table of civilized people. And there were a number of different strands that led to the relative success of our struggle. Part of it was the armed struggle on Umkhonto weSizwe, led by brave and courageous soldiers such as Joe Slovo and Ronnie Kasrils, and both of them incidentally, and only incidentally, also Jews. The other part was the struggle inside our country. And I see many faces here today who were a part of that struggle when we took to the streets. We took them on our streets, we took them on our university campuses, we took them on our factory floors. Wherever we encountered them, we took them on. And it was through this hard struggle of our people, the willingness to quite literally take the slogan, freedom or death, victory in our lifetime, to take the slogan quite literally and to embrace it, to go to the streets every day and not to know whether you're going to return alive at home. This was our struggle inside this country. And of course, there was the international leg, where ordinary people, ordinary churchgoers, ordinary community people throughout their countries, in their churches, collected money on a weekly basis for our country. Different kinds of schemes were set up through the International Defence and Aid Fund to provide the support for our country. People in their thousands took to the streets to identify with our prisoners sitting on Robben Island and elsewhere. Our country today is free because the international community said no to apartheid. Our country is free because the international community said no to the humiliation of black people in South Africa and the separation of people from each other on the basis of ethnicity. When our people were being killed on the streets, people marched in London, people marched in China, people marched in Washington, D.C. Our neighboring countries, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Namibia, all of these countries didn't only face an ordinary kind of sanctions from South Africa, but those countries were invaded, their citizens were killed because of our people here. And that, by the way, is one of the reasons why xenophobia is particularly tragic in our country today. Every single South African struggle veteran, every single South African struggle veteran, and here, with due respect to an aging old man, I'm not including Gatsha Buthelezi. Every single veteran of the South African liberation struggle who had ever been to the land of Israel and Palestine have come back with a single message, and it is that nothing that the South African people had ever experienced under apartheid remotely equates what the Palestinians experience daily in life in the shadow of Zionism. Life in the shadow of Zionism is far worse. It's a picnic compared to what we had experienced under apartheid. And so in some ways, yes, we in BDS, in the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement, in the Palestine solidarity movement, in some ways, yes, we speak about Israeli apartheid because we know that we recognize something of what we have experienced there. And sometimes they ask us, oh, it's an insult to the people. No, it's not an insult to the people of South Africa to use this term. South African people, we've earned our freedom because of international solidarity. It is our generosity and our gratitude to the international community that when we see the same suffering that we had endured, we are willing to use the same word for their suffering. We are not as selfish, as self-centered, as narcissistic, as absorbed into ourselves as so many of our fellow human beings in the Jewish community are. I'm referring particularly to the Zionists. This word, for example, the Holocaust. The Holocaust was first used in the Bible for the mass slaughtering of animals, Today, if you use the word Holocaust for anything else, massacres on huge scales. The massacre in Rwanda, for example, the Holocaust in Rwanda, they only allow you to use the word genocide. No, you can't use the word Holocaust. Here, a word appropriated from the Bible for the massacre of animals, a particular group of people want to appropriate for themselves and say it only applies to us. No. South Africans are far more generous than what Zionists are. South Africans are willing to let this term apartheid be used when we recognize something similar to it elsewhere and something far more worse than what it is. And so every single South African who have been a part of this liberation struggle, when we go there, and I've been there about 10 times or more, we see what we've seen in South Africa, and we see much worse. The separation of people from people, the separate roads, collective punishment. Israel is the only regime in the world that in law sanctions collective punishment. The worst in South Africa that we came to the question of collective punishment was a case in the Northern Cape, where a whole group of people participated in the killing of a policeman, and the whole group was charged. But it was unclear who in the group was responsible for it. And in law, they were charged, but they were set free because there was nothing in South Africa that sanctioned collective punishment. Here in Israel, we have a situation where if there's a suspect living in a house, the whole house can be bombed, the entire family can be bombed. And of course, occasionally they drop leaflets on people's houses and then say that because we drop leaflets on their houses, people had the freedom to leave their houses. Imagine, anybody going around in New York throwing leaflets on people's houses and saying that because we've thrown a leaflet on your place warning you, therefore you can go. And so we, the South African people, more than any other people who owe so much of our freedom to the international community, we have a responsibility. Mandela, when he said that South Africa will never be free until the Palestinians are free, it was something of the recognition of what we have and the debt that we owe to people of the world. Of course, we are always asked, why do you single out Israel? Isn't this anti-Semitism? First of all, I have only 24 hours in a day. I must choose my battles. All of us choose our battles. There are other comrades amongst us whose major terrain of struggle is the factory floor. There are other comrades amongst us whose major terrain of struggle is the mining industry. There are other comrades amongst us whose major terrain of struggle is environmental justice. We don't go around saying, why do you single out environmental justice? Why do you single out the workers' struggle? We realize that we are part of the same struggle. And so, comrades, we are in front of Dirko today. Sadly, some of the Dirko people also ask, why don't you go to the Israeli embassy? We go to the Israeli embassy from time to time. We go there, yes, we will go there another time. But today we are in front of the Department of International Relations and Cooperation to demand from our government, a government that most of us here, if you talk in narrow recent election terms, that most of us here voted for. But above all, we're standing in front of the Foreign Affairs Department of a government that came into power on our sweat, on the blood of our parents, on the blood of our comrades. This is a democracy. The country of this people have spoken. Again, recently they have spoken. They have put this government in power. And we are the people of this country. We therefore come to our Department of International Relations and Cooperation to demand that they expel the South African, that they expel the Israeli ambassador to South Africa, that they recall the South African ambassador in Tel Aviv, and that they take all steps necessary to reduce and finally eliminate all economic relations between our country and Israel.